you get 5 promotions in 5 years, you go from being the telephone boy to the executive team of a Fortune 100 company, you're earning good money. The mindset shift happens here because now you're dealing with money that you never really thought that you were ever going to be dealing with, that you would ever be earning, particularly as I was homeless, sleeping on the streets at one point. We talked about me buying a pair of Giuseppe Gianottis for £1,000, right? That was an instant dopamine hit. And all that was going through my head was, oh my God, I can't wait to rock up in the office on like Friday. People see these on my feet, I'm going to look sick, right? I'm thinking about all the wrong things. I'm not thinking about, hang on a second, it's £1,000. Like, I worked hard for this £1,000 and I'm just going to give this away right now. But I think it's really important for us to tune into those moments, those little instances in time that present us with an opportunity to see the epiphany for what it is.
Hello and welcome to the Humanising Finance Podcast with me, Krystle McGilvery. Here we get under the skin of money. We expose the emotional, cognitive and psychological factors that affect you and your money. Most importantly, we aim to leave you feeling empowered and with at least one nugget you can action immediately after listening. Now, today, I am thrilled to have a spectacular guest on the show. Now, my guest is passionate about helping people become their own financial heroes through positive financial habits. My guest is a qualified financial advisor, qualified mortgage advisor. Most excitedly, my guest is a published author. I am talking about Peter Komolafe. He is the man behind the conversation of money. He is a very successful YouTuber, podcaster, and TV presenter. He is the financial expert on Channel 4's Secret Spenders, ITVs Lorraine, Steph's Packed Lunch, has featured in The Sun, Times, Metro, Voice, BBC, and so much more. Peter, hello.
You know what? I've not had anyone give me that kind of introduction before. That's pretty good. That's awesome. Thank you.
You know what? You sent me your bio, right? And I was like, what is this? Why are you giving me a 1/10 of you? This is not good enough.
Yeah, but you know what? It's weird, like, reading off your own accolades. It's like, and I don't necessarily know if I see them as accolades. They're just things that have happened as a byproduct of everything over the last 2 to 3 years. So I look at it sometimes, I'm like, actually, this is pretty wild. Maybe I should, talk about this a little bit more. But at the same time, I think one thing that I've learned is you should never feed into your own hype, because the minute you do, that's kind of like the beginning of the end in my head. So I'm like, I always try and keep it level-headed and stay humble.
As you can hear, guys, Peter is very humble. I've known him for a few years now, and yes, he is very humble. But as you can see, he is also phenomenal. So put them together and enjoy. It's okay. So I'm excited about this conversation. We will be talking about you and, a bit about your journey. And then, of course, as you guys know, we get under the skin of finance and what you do with your money. So we'll be touching on psychological aspects of Peter's journey and how this may be similar to what you're going through. And hopefully you can relate to some parts of it, and that can help you on your own journey. And second to that as well, very current, we're going to be looking at the environment and what's happening and how this is influencing what you are doing with your money, all in aims of helping you regain control and understand a bit more and make better choices. So I'm going to dive right in. Now, many of us have come across the terms scarcity mindset. I think that's a common term that people are using. And this is where you believe that there are maybe limited resources, and if someone else has something, lots of money, there's not enough money around, and it's all a bit negative and limiting. Or we've heard people talk about you buying things just to look good when you actually can't afford it. And a lot of this has a negative association. But what we rarely do is look a bit deeper and understand, why is this happening psychologically? Now, if I give you a quick example, on the buying things when you can't actually afford it, we want to feel connected to others. It's innate. It's part of our nature. We want to be part of a group, accepted. So yeah, we may spend more than we can actually afford. What it does is it helps us to signal to others in the group that we fit in. Now, Peter, I want to bring you in here because we've spoken before and you've done this amazing video talking about your success story, which is what I will call it, where you shared your personal journey with us from being in care to working in a big firm and now teaching others to be better with their money. So I want to dig into the thinking that's going on in your head through this journey. What was happening for you psychologically? So kind of having no money to then having lots of it. And I know you shared stories about spending on, was it trainers? That was like, I can't remember, how expensive they were.
A pair of Giuseppe's, £1,000.
Oh, back
terrible.
in the day.
It's terrible. It's really, really bad. Back in the day, really, really bad. I always have that as kind of like my one point of reference to remind me of, irresponsible spending. But you mentioned scarcity mindset. So I discovered a scarcity mindset, and I only know this now because I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out why I went and spent £1,000 on a pair of trainers to feel good, to look successful, to fit into my environment at the time. And I put it down to two instances. There was an instance when I was about 5 or 6, so I was fostered, obviously, from 3 months to 8 years old. And I remember my next door neighbour, Glenn, where we lived, at dinner times, his kitchen smelled like it smelled like Nigella Lawson was in there. It just aromas, just like his dinners were awesome. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I wonder what he's having. We'd have conversations about what he's having for dinner, and he'll be like, oh, we're having this. And then when I get back into our house next door, it's like we're having like beans on toast for dinner, or fish fingers and, chips for dinner.
Yeah,
right?
Not quite the same.
It's not the same. And even as a kid then, it kind of ingrained, maybe we can't afford to have those kind of dinners. Yeah. And I didn't know this then, but I know this now after a lot of, reflection, that embedded a scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
Now, when I fast forward to that incidence of, spending £1,000 on a pair of trainers, that's because of the scarcity mindset. Even though I'd done really, really well through my career of, starting in financial services in 2006 as a cashier, working my way into Canary Wharf, starting on the phone as a telephone salesperson, bottom of the barrel role, to the executive team in 5 years. When I started to make good money, in my head, it was like, okay, so number one, I don't have a university degree, so I don't really fit here in Canary Wharf anyway. I look at my peers, I look different, I am different. My background is entirely different. I'm there with, university educated Eton boys, and there's me, right? And for me, it was like, okay, how do I fit in? And so buying, £1,000 pair of Giuseppe trainers or £1,000 suit was just normal because I tried to fit into that environment. And I think a lot of it came down to the fact that I had that early recognition or mindset around scarcity, that money is a scarce resource. So when you start to earn good money, what you should technically be doing is you should try and enjoy it and make the most of it at the time. And that essentially leads to a habit where you're thinking more in the moment, instant gratification, than long term, and thinking about money as a tool to help you create the life that you want.
Thanks for that, Peter. And you know what? It's a really good example when you talk about, as a young boy living next door and hearing, smelling someone else's food. It's a really real experience, right? And it's that whole contrast piece. And again, you want to fit in with people around you. And I guess as well, you being different, being black and being in a different environment, that stark difference must have stuck out. And then I wonder, in terms of kind of you working now and earning good money, what helped you kind of make that change?
It's, you know what? That's a really good question. I think there are a couple of things, really. I've been on my own journey, obviously, right? And trying to understand why I make decisions in the way that I do. It's something that fascinates me and it interests me quite a bit. And I think, as human beings, we are byproducts of our experiences. I don't believe that we're byproducts of our environment. I think that's way too generic and it's way too lazy. It's a get out clause, right? We are byproducts of our own experiences. But I think that, when you're growing up, you have formative instances, like little points in time that shape, mold your mindset, the way you see the world, and those things inform your future decisions. Yeah. And for me, like when I was a kid, understanding, well, Glenn's having better dinners than mine, definitely for sure was one of those formative things. I had another one when I was about eight or nine 8 or 9 years old. I was in Nigeria. I asked my dad if we were poor, my mum and dad whether we were poor or not, and they just laughed at me like I didn't understand the world. Right? That was another instance of scarcity being set in, and it's
Yeah.
funny because when I finally got to the point where I was working in Canary Wharf, like for me, I shouldn't have been there. Like the odds of me being there were just like, how did this happen? And you talk about visualization. I kind of visualized this when I started in financial services. Like, if I could ever work in Canary Wharf, that would be so, so sick. Like, if you walking around Canary Wharf on like the weekends or during the week when I had time off, just to see people in their suits and, you know, walking around looking happy, looking busy. And it's like, if you work here, you've made it. So to finally make it there was like, okay, this is pretty insane. And you can't but help, or at least I couldn't help, but to go on my mindset kind of changed a little bit. It was like, okay, now I'm here. I don't really belong here, so I've got to try and maximize it. But it's very, very different when you are successful. You get 5 promotions in 5 years. You go from being the telephone boy to the executive team of a Fortune 100 company. You're earning good money. The mindset shift happens here because now you're dealing with money that you never really thought that you were ever going to be dealing with, that you would ever be earning, particularly as I was homeless, sleeping on the streets at one point. And so it allowed me to get to the point where things like getting on the property ladder, you know, is now a real thing. I could actually make that happen. Like, I'm earning good enough money to make it happen. And I think it's those pivotal moments. And luckily I had people that were great sponsors to me, who supported me, who gave me opportunity. And I reference one of my managers there, a guy called Richard Horner. He had a conversation with me. He said, look, obviously you look nice and you're wearing these nice suits and stuff, but like, what's this for? What you doing this for? This job is stressful enough, but why are you here? And it was the first time where I was like, okay, I should probably start thinking about things properly and set a target, a goal. And that was really helped me focus around, okay, I'm earning good money, I'm doing really, really well, but let's really put this money to good use to help me move forward with my own personal goals. Like the idea of buying a house, having enough money to get a deposit together to get on a property ladder after being homeless, sleeping on the streets, like that's a universe away from where I was back then. And everyone goes on their journey, but I think it's really important for us to tune into those moments, those little instances in time that present us with an opportunity to see the epiphany for what it is and be bold enough to make the change that we need to make as well.
I really like that. There's so much you said there, and I'm like, I want to touch on it all. But, you know, just that last point there where you said it's really important to reflect on your journey and identify what key points transformed you in different parts of your life. And I think it was Michael Tabradi, who I went to one of his masterclasses once, and he done this timeline exercise where you literally mark down key points in your life's journey. And it's a really nice and exposing thing to do. And it definitely leaves you feeling positive and empowered because you see, this is how far I've come. I am awesome. And another thing I wanted to pick up on as well, and just,
look, the whole timeline thing, like I'm a qualified financial advisor. So when I was advising clients, we would use the timeline to help people plot forward. But here's a saying someone said to me years and years and years ago, and I didn't understand it at the time, because I was like still in my 20s. And so they said, you can never connect the dots moving forward. You can connect them moving backwards. And everything that happens, if you're awake, if you're aware enough of those epiphanies, those formative moments, when you look backwards and connect them, they all make sense as in relation to where you are right now. And trust me, it is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I think I would encourage everyone, just take that exercise, just look backwards, because one of the key things that I think that we don't often spend too much time on, which I always have to make sure I do, gratitude. We get caught up in the hype of, well, this is the next thing we need to do. This is the next thing we need to get. This is the next goal we need to achieve, right? But we forget, simply 5 years ago, you weren't here. You've made progress. And I think it's really powerful when you can just pause and just take a minute and be like, okay, let me just have a look back over the journey so far, refresh yourself, and use that as fuel to move forward. I mean, again, like 19-year-old me sleeping on the street. to what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Like, in what universe does this happen? You know, and I think gratitude is so, so important.
It is, and it makes me think back to a reel I shared just the other day, and actually what you're saying is spot on to that. And it was about, you know, we compare ourselves to others and blah, 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 all that stuff. But the focus I want to make here, the point I want to make is actually in terms of measuring yourself and doing better, it's not about the actual thing you're doing. It's about the progress you're making
Mm-hmm.
and you measuring that commitment, that determination, that change. And that's where you see your growth. It's not I have this much money. It's actually I've committed to this change and I've made that change. So that I really like that. And I just wanted to mention just back to this, you know, you had a figure in your life who kind of shook you up a bit and got you to look at yourself and reflect on what you're doing and what you want, you're trying to do going forward. And I think that's really important as well, because it made me think, and this is why I was asking you the question about, you know, what changed for you, because we hear the stories about lottery winners who get loads of money and they blow it. So their mindset hasn't changed. But I think what's really important is actually we need those influences, those experiences to kind of give us a nudge, push us over there and, you know, get us to think differently and expose us to new things. Otherwise, you will be in the same mindset. You will just do the same thing. But like you had someone saying, well, what are you doing, Peter? You look great, sure. But what are you doing? And then obviously you was able to make that change.
Yeah.
I want to move on here to current day and what's happening. And of course, we're looking at it psychologically to understand the influence that it's having. So, as we all know, right now we're having to make financial decisions in a really unstable and uncertain environment. For example, I imagine that loads of people are questioning whether they'll have a job tomorrow or whether their electricity bills will be too high for them to manage. Now, there's something that we do psychologically. We overestimate threats, which means we see them as bigger than they are. And we underestimate our ability to handle them. So we assume that if this happens, oh my gosh, I'm going to crash and burn. I can't deal with it. Psychologically, understandably, we don't like unknowingness. We prefer to feel safe and familiar. So we tend to make up unreal stories to feel safe. Scientists report that living with job uncertainty takes a greater toll on your health than actually losing your job. And that was, you know, neuroscience looking at the brain and the influence it has, which I think is really interesting and just really raises the point that uncertainty does shake us up. Now, kind of looking at the current environment and the economy and what's happening, just kind of wanted to ask you, Peter, what are the main areas you see that people are worried about when it comes to them planning their financial future? So in my head, I'm thinking, is it like property ownership, investing, retirement plans? What do you see people are kind of really panicking about?
I think there are a mixture of things, and I think people are in different stages of their finances as well, and this translates across the different phases of finance. On one end of my followership across YouTube and Instagram, you have those who are concerned about their investment portfolios. On one hand, you've got people who are concerned about, well, how on earth am I going to afford to get on the property ladder? Because even though we're seeing property prices come down, interest rates increasing basically means that affordability becomes an issue, right? And there are so many other factors that feed into that. And then on the other end of the scale, and I'm seeing this and hearing this every week on Steph Pack Lunch, people are struggling to deal with just their basic bills, essentials. And so there's a big, across the board, there is concern. And I think one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about is that we have to kind of go back to basics here. And I know this is going to be a pun that references the book, and it was intentional in titling the book, The Money Basics, because there are certain things that we need to make sure that we have in place from a financial point of view to stand us in the best position possible. So you just referenced that we tend to overestimate the risk and our ability to deal with them. And a lot of that comes down to how focused or aware we are of our financial situation. Now, in the book, I talk about the basic formula because I wanted to keep it very, very simple. And at the top of that formula is budgeting. right? And people listening to this will know we've heard the story about budgeting. We know how important it is, but the reality is for many people who may be struggling right now, you can only budget so far. That is 100% true.
Yeah.
But having something sound in place gives you the foundation. The way I describe budgeting is if you look at the Shard, for example, right? It took a good amount of years, a ton of money, hundreds of people to basically build. But the one thing that it has that sets it and keeps it in place, able to weather the storms of all kinds, is a strong foundation. If it didn't have a foundation, there is no way you would risk your life going into that building, because if something happened, right, it will collapse. The foundation is the confidence that you have in any building. The same thing applies for your finances. So your budget is really, really important. And, when I think about the struggles that a lot of people are dealing with, when you really sit down, especially when I coach people, when I really sit down and go through things with people, there's something being missed in that foundational piece. Another thing that people are concerned about at the moment and they're struggling to deal with is the fact that unfortunately, we've laden ourselves with a lot of debt when debt was cheap, when interest rates were so low. And now with energy costs going up, fuel costs going up, you've got council tax going up, you've got everything going up, interest rates rising. Now, whatever disposable income people felt that they had left over, if they had some left over, is now getting squeezed. And that's making debt even harder to manage now. So there's a mixture of things across people's livelihoods that are a big concern. And I think going back to basics and just understanding this is really paying attention to the small details in our finances is so key. And I say this all the time, like, this isn't the first time we've been in this kind of situation from an economic point of view, right? 2007, 2008, we had a recession. The circumstances were slightly different, but the impact is the same. People feel squeezed. People feel under financial pressure. And what I'm really passionate about trying to convey to people is, if life is all about lessons and bettering ourselves, what do we learn now to put us in the best stead for when this next happens? And it will. It could be 10 years down the line. It could be 7 years down the line. But we'll be in a situation again where we're under pressure, where the economy is suffering, where we're in a recession. What do we learn now? What can we implement now to help us cope better in the future? Because if you're not learning from what's happening, then we're standing still, right? We're not really developing. We're not really growing.
I like that. And I think you're so right. And I'm glad you said that, because people do see, budgeting, the basics I want the exciting stuff. But actually, if there's holes in that basic stuff, you're not going to last. It's not going to, it's not going to be stable for the foreseeable. Mm-hmm. And that actually nicely moves us into kind of the investing space. And I know you're quite passionate about that, as in what others are doing, which we don't enjoy. So it will be good to talk about the space of investing, trading. And I just want to mention a couple of biases here that are really interesting, I think. So often when others are doing something or something's happening in the market, people often feel like they have to do something as well. And that we call action bias, which, again, I'm sure you're going to have something to say on that. Then there's also confirmation bias, which is, people have an idea of maybe a stock to buy or something to do in terms of investing, and they may do a bit of research. But confirmation bias has it that you will only pay attention to the information that confirms what you already think. It's such a trap, right? And then the final one, which I guess links back to her action bias, is herding, just following the crowd. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, especially now. And yeah.
So I cover this in the book because I've got a chapter on investing alone. And look, I could speak about this all day because I'm really, really passionate about this stuff. And, I spent years in the wealth management sector. I think if you take where we are right now if you encapsulate this period of time and put it in a time capsule, you'll find that we've been in these situations again, because it's a recession, right? Market cycle. We've been in this situation so many times before, okay? And one of the things that you'll hear on social media is that this is the best time to invest because you're in a recession. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that people, or at least first-time investors, are making is confirmation bias. They hear something on social media which lights a fuse, light bulb goes on.
Makes them
and
feel good.
Oh yeah, and typically this message is selling them the dream, the Lamborghini, the Rolex, the lifestyle, the passive income. You don't have to do much work to be able to travel the world and be a digital nomad. The investment that you put your money into is going to pay into that, right? It lights the fuse, lights the light bulb. What they then do is they then go and find out a little bit more information, and oftentimes, and I know this may ruffle some feathers, but believe me, after 15 years, I know this stuff, and I've seen it so many times. When they go and find this information, a lot of it is clickbait, a lot of it is false, incorrect information. You then go down this rabbit hole of information that leads you into buying individual stocks and dividend investing and all this kind of stuff, right? And you buy into the hype and you start to confirmation bias the information, the narrative that you've been given, right?
Yes.
And that then informs the stock picks that they make. They go into this, and in my experience, what tends to happen is they get sorely disappointed because the reality of investing is very, very different to this great picture that's been painted on social media. And so I think it's very, very important right now to be level-headed and to think about it for what it is. Like I said, we've been here before. There are time capsules of what happens in these kind of instances that we can look back upon across history. Now, the reality is, if you look at any of the popular, famous investors, the Warren Buffetts of this world, right? They will tell you that this is the best time to invest. And it's right. But if you know how to do that in the right way, and that's where you go back to the basics. What is investing all about? Investing is about buying companies that service society, right? That's what it's all about at the end of the day. For the past 2-3 years, it's all been about tech stocks, Tesla, Amazon, Palantir. It's been about EVs and some of this sexy stuff, right? That will give you a 10x return. Okay, great. That's fine if you want to buy into that narrative. But actually, investing is not about that. Investing is about buying companies that are integral to the way we live. And I talk about this in the book. So you think about it now. Let's take it from this point right now. What do people need? People need to eat. People need to heat their homes. People need financing, right? And people essentially need the basics. So what are the companies that are doing very, very well when everything is falling? Energy companies. Love them or hate them, they're making a lot of profit. But if you are invested in them as a shareholder, as an investor, you're very happy right now because they're doing extremely well. Food companies. Let's just take a company like Coca-Cola, right? A drinks company doing extremely well. The banks, the financials, doing extremely well. Back end of 2022, consumer debt, so this is overdrafts, credit cards, increased by £1.5 billion. 1.5 billion pounds. 80% of that, 1.2%, was on credit cards. So when you really think about it, if you're invested in the banks or American Express, guess what? Those companies are going to be doing right now. Now, why is that? Because they are providing a service that is essential to the way we live. And so when you look at investing, it is a key proponent to building wealth, creating financial freedom, but you have to look at it for what it is. Think about it pragmatically. What are the things that you're using day to day? What are the things that are essential to your livelihood? You look at those companies that provide those products, those services first, and then you build out into some of the other sexier stuff once you have a good holding in those companies. And understanding, look, you're not going to get this right 100% of the time. There is risk. There is no such thing as risk-free investing. But if you understand how to mitigate that risk and manage that risk, you're onto a winner. But it's understanding what investing is all about. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we're seeing at the moment. It's people FOMOing because they have a fear of missing out, herding. My mate's doing this down the pub. My mate said this. My mate did that. But look, I say this all the time. If you want, to have your teeth pulled out, you're not going to go to a brain surgeon, and vice versa. If you want a brain surgery, you're not going to go to a dentist to perform brain surgery.
I said the same thing.
Do not take financial advice from people down the pub. Like, be careful. Like, channels like mine are there to provide information. You still need to understand it, but it's really important to have a level head and not get carried away, specifically with investing.
Thank you for that, Peter. I say that and that last bit as well all the time. In my, circle of friends and family, I say about dating, maybe don't take dating advice from someone who has, had a plethora of bad relationships. It's the same thing here. You want to take advice from the right people. And I think this leans perfectly into what we do naturally and on our needs, our basic needs of fitting in and feeling accepted and being loved and belonging and all of that. And that is what's happening. So when there's a narrative about you can have this lifestyle and be part of this crew or this, level in society, you want that. And that looks sexy and exciting. But actually just pause for a second and try to identify, okay, what's motivating you here? What's getting you excited here? What are you feeling too excited in your insides about investing? You shouldn't be. Investing should be dry. Investing should be dry, put money away and leave it. It shouldn't be this dopamine hit thing. That's, unless you have
that right there is the most dangerous thing. And I reference this in the book. Like, people think it's fun. Okay, look, I love the fact that people are seeing investment as something that is interesting and fun, but it shouldn't be treated as a leisurely activity. Like, at the end of the day, you're putting your hard-earned money into this thing, and the question that you need to ask is that if you put £1,000 into it, or whatever it is that you can afford, and that money were to be gone overnight, how are you going to feel?
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't gamble with your money. You wouldn't just walk into a casino with your money, but okay, hey, all on black. And not have a second thought of, hang on a second, I'm risking money. It's the same thing with investing. So having a level head is so, so important. Not being caught up in the hype. And social media adds to this so much. It's one of the reasons why I don't like social media, but, it's a necessary evil, I feel.
Yeah, and I understand, just having sympathy that when you don't know about something and it's really confusing and overwhelming, and someone comes along with a really simple explanation as to, hey, you can win money by pressing this button. For those who are really overwhelmed by the confusing information, I can see how going with those opportunities makes sense to you. Like, I get it. But here, especially, and I guess, now, this is where... Yeah.
Especially now with the cost of living crisis. And I've said this all
exactly
much over the course of the year. Like, you need to have eyes in the back of your head right now, because, the scammers are smart. They know that people are struggling. So if they come along with, you put, £100 in, we'll give you X return, and they will fulfill that promise the first 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. But ultimately, they're building to something bigger. And it's easy to fall for it. I see people fall for it all the time. You just have to ask yourself, does it sound too good to be true? If it does, it probably is.
And this is where the conversation of money in itself is so important, because more people talking about it, there's more opportunities for people to be like, not sure about that. Hey, check out Pete's page. And I was gonna check in to see kind of your thoughts on what people can do to reframe that. But actually, we've covered some of that, which is, I think, pausing, checking to see if you're too excited. Are you feeling a bit of dopamine and hyperness inside you? And actually, that shouldn't be what's going on when you're looking at investing or looking at these opportunities.
And on top of that, I think you should never make any financial decision when you are in that heightened state.
100%.
Right? You should never, ever, ever, ever make those financial decisions in that moment. You need to stop. So, for example, right, we talked about me buying a pair of Giuseppe Delantis for £1,000, right? That was an instant dopamine hit. And all that was going through my head was, oh my God, I can't wait to rock up in the office on like Friday. People see these on my feet. I'm going to look sick, right? I'm thinking about all the wrong things. I'm not thinking about, hang on a second, it's £1,000. Like, I worked hard for this £1,000 and I'm just going to give this away right now. I'm thinking about all the wrong things. I was not level-headed at all, right? If you feel that you're not taking a level-headed decision, that's the sign for you to be like, listen, pause, step away, come back, reconsider.
I like that. And the same is true in both ends of the spectrum in terms of emotional heightenedness. It could be complete sadness. I used to work in Oxford Street and I had a really crappy job, and on a Friday I'd leave feeling exhausted and really drained and really quite down. And I'd go and spend all my money on Oxford Street, so that's, one extreme, and the other extreme is extreme excitement. You shouldn't make decisions in either. So yeah, really good point. And thank you for mentioning that. We are coming to the end, but I have one other question. Please do tell us about your book.
Okay, so the book is called The Money Basics: How to Become Your Own Financial Hero. So the idea of being your own financial hero isn't that you've got to be Superman or Superwoman. It's simply having control over your finances where you feel that you're able to make choices out of freedom in opposed to necessity. So it's putting on your big boy pants, big girl pants, and getting underneath, okay, what is this all about? So the book is designed to be as practical as possible. There's one thing that I don't like is, you read great things, but it doesn't actually move you on the journey. So in the book, there are 4 tasks, and task 1 is very, very important. I encourage you to complete the task, and specifically task 3 of task 1. It's all about life planning. So we mentioned this, looking backwards, having gratitude. This one plans forward. What are your goals? What are you doing this for, right? What is the objective? Money is a tool, life is for living. So if that is true, and money is a tool to help you create the life that you want, what do you want? And then using the formula, which covers budgeting, avoiding debt, saving early, investing early, and credit score. Those 5 key components are crucial to becoming your own financial hero. But like I said, it's there to be as practical as possible and to move people along the journey. I talk a lot about my own experiences, my own lessons. That formula has worked for me personally, and I feel like, maybe this is something that I've developed through being homeless, through learning stuff, or, in financial services, having my own epiphanies. It's culminated into this formula. I'm in a position where I have no debt. I've got a small mortgage, but I don't owe any other money elsewhere. I'm financially free. I have security. And I just want to bring people along that journey with my story being the backdrop to hopefully inspire and be that catalyst for people to take charge.
It sounds amazing, Peter. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for joining me. It's been wonderful having you as always.
Thank you.
Well, how can people find you?
Yeah, so YouTube, if you type in my name, Peter Komolafe, Instagram is Conversation of Money. My podcast is called the Conversation of Money Podcast. It's out every Monday at 6 a.m. There's a good number of episodes on there now. You can access all that information for free. And on Instagram as well, I think I've mentioned Conversation of Money on Instagram.
So you've just been listening to Peter Komolafe, The Conversation of Money. I hope you enjoyed it. We had a great conversation about the psychological factors and the environmental factors that affect you and what you do with your money. Pete, lovely guy, shared what he went through from being in foster care to working in a big firm to now leading his own business and supporting others with their finances, to the current day and the impact that the current economy is having on investors and people's decisions and planning for the future. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, Krystle signing out.